Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jabbering Jake Podcast. We are back at it again on the heels of our first guest episode. That's right, I was telling you all for what seemed like years that I would eventually have guests on this podcast, and lo and behold, we finally did it. Now, it was a bit tricky capturing the audio for both of us, because if I'm just recording myself, well, simple enough, I just have my microphone that I speak into and my program that records me. But with two people, I can't just, unless we're in the same room, have both of us speak into the microphone. And that was the case this time because my guest Tom, he still lives up in Vermont and I'm down in Alabama, so we couldn't be in the same room. So we had to do it over a call, and the methods I had for recording that as of right now did not work out too well. I did the best with what I could, but I'm going to be looking into ways to record other guests' audio better for future episodes. This is all part of the learning process, as this podcast has been since the beginning. But it was really cool to have Tom here on the episode. He had, as I figured, but still surprisingly, he had so many interesting things to talk about, and we barely scratched the surface. And I had prepared some questions ahead of time, just in case. Never there as, okay, we have to ask these questions now. But just in case we needed something to sort of spark conversation, I had some questions prepared. But as it turned out, we didn't even really need that. We just kind of were chatting for a few minutes before we started recording the episode, and he started going off on a very interesting philosophical theory. And so I was like, oh, hold on, I'm going to start recording. This is actually really cool. So, unsurprisingly, but also surprisingly, he had tons and tons to talk about that. I mean, we didn't even touch the questions, like I said, that I prepared. So he'll be back for some more episodes, and hopefully by then I'll have my audio issues sorted out. But a big thanks and shout out to him for being my first ever guest on this podcast. And we look forward to the next time when he will be returning. Or at least I know I do for sure. I'm looking forward to having him on the podcast again. And having some other people on as well every now and then. And it looks like probably the way it'll be is it won't be an extra bonus episode per month. It's just going to be a normal, regular old episode. Well, not regular. Not a regular episode for sure. But it'll be put in the normal episode order. Because it is definitely not a chore, but it's definitely a decent amount of work to try and think of stuff to talk about every week and finding the time to record, especially with full-time responsibilities like dogs to take care of and a job to work and stuff like that. So I think it'll be good to have those guest episodes as fitting into the regular episode order every now and then. And it's great because it's fun to have someone else to bounce ideas and topics off of. You know, when you record an episode by yourself like this, it's fun, and I wanted to do it because I didn't want to have to rely on getting someone for every episode, and I wanted to try to improve. I don't know if it would be my public speaking or improve my conversational skills. It's just certainly, I couldn't say it's purely either of those because I'm monologuing. But I guess it is teaching me to think about more thoughtful ways to present ideas or something like that. But anyway, from the get-go, I wanted it to be something where I didn't have to rely on guests so that people didn't just want to hear me talk. Although maybe people don't just want to hear me talk. I don't know. But I wanted to sort of set the premise first of, you know, if we don't have a guest every week, it's okay. It doesn't affect the podcast because it's business as usual. But I'll definitely say it's super fun to have somebody else to actually engage in conversation with. I do love talking with people, and having someone else to bounce ideas off, it opens up way more different topics to talk about than just monologuing to myself. I certainly couldn't have a discussion like I did with Tom last week by myself. It would just kind of be a rant. But anyway, I've finished enough milking time out of this episode to talk about other things. Let's get right into it, shall we? We'll start with the tiny little cool things that I've picked up since the last episode. So, my dad has this headlamp that he uses every now and then when he's doing something in the dark outside or whatever, and it's a pretty decent headlamp. You know, the battery lasts for a while. It's super bright. You can adjust the brightness and the angle and all that. And I said to him, "Hey, where'd you get this headlamp? I need something like this. You know, I have plenty of flashlights and stuff like that, but the ease of use of a headlamp where your hands free and you have light wherever you look, or you can adjust the angle upwards or downwards a little bit, it's just fantastic, and the brightness was great." So I asked him where he got it, and he just got it at Tractor Supply for like $30. So I ended up going and getting one of them myself, and it has been life-changing. I mean, I use it now almost more than I use the lights in my house. It's crazy because it's just convenient. I mean, you're not, if you have your phone, because we have our phones for a lot of flashlights and stuff, right? You got to turn it on, you got to pull down the menu, you got to find the flashlight button or whatever. And you still got to hold it in your hand, and you're going to be even more careful with it than you would a normal flashlight because it's your phone. You don't want it to get wet or dirty or whatever. But to have this, you just hands-free, press the button, you're looking around, and there's a light. And, well, there's really not much more to say about it. Actually, no, there is. I have an interesting story about something that happened on that topic of the headlamp. So, I recently had misplaced one of my rain jackets. So I was looking around everywhere for it. I asked my parents if I had left it at their house. I was looking around at my house and, like, in my car and stuff like that. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I thought, I don't know, maybe did I leave it in, like, my tool shed or something like that? So I checked. I went out to check one night. I had the headlamp on because it was dark when I went out because it's winter, so it gets dark by like 5 o'clock right now. And as I was headed toward the shed, I had the light on my head, and I was just kind of walking, looking around. And I have these woods right up behind my house. And as I was turning my head, the light sort of shone up into the woods, and I caught this glow. And it looked like, a pair of eyes, like animals' eyes that light up in the dark. But this was like bright, piercing, like orange glowing eyes, like something out of like a game or a movie or something, like some demonic entity, right? Some rather ominous, sinister being. So I was kind of curious about what was up there. I kept looking for a while, and they just kind of sat there staring down at me because, well, presumably because I was staring a bright light into them. And it just made me so curious to go up and see what was staring down at me. So I went into the shed, looked around for my rain jacket, didn't find it there. A quick aside, I did end up finding it later. It was tucked away in my gym bag. But I went in there, looked around for the jacket. It wasn't there. I came back out, and I looked up to see if the eyes were still there, which I really was hoping they were, because I really wanted to see what was up in there. Sure enough, the eyes were still kind of there, and every once in a while they'd turn away, they'd like disappear, and they'd come back and stuff like that. So I went out of the fence in my yard and went around to the back of my house, and I started to climb up. Now it's this big sort of sloping like hill up behind my house, just goes higher up into the woods. So I kind of had to climb up this initial hump to start getting in there. And I was walking along, moving up closer to it, keeping an eye. And, it was one of those things where I could make out the eyes, but I couldn't quite yet make out the figure behind them because I was still too far away. It was kind of enough to just reflect the light, but it was still, it didn't have the light didn't sort of penetrate very far. It just was almost like it sort of tapered off quite quickly, I guess, and became more of just like a flood light, but not enough to see any detail, right? So I'm sort of keeping my gaze on where these eyes are coming from as I'm moving up so I can move towards it. And at one point there was this huge spider web in the forest with like a man-eating spider in it. I obviously heroically and bravely moved past it, and I'm getting closer, and I'm getting closer, and finally I get up, and I didn't know if this thing was going to run away from me as I was moving. It was a bit of a gamble, but I get up close to the pair of eyes that I saw, and it was my cat. The cat was just chilling up there in the woods because he likes to go outside every now and then because he, managed to figure out how to use the doggy door. And he was just chilling up in the woods, staring down upon his domain, staring down at me as I was working my way up towards him. And as I reached him, he looked at me with disdain, as if I'd invaded his secret lair. And I was like, okay, cool. And then the dogs started barking as they heard me up in the woods, and I just looked down into my bedroom window, and all I can see is one of the dog's eyes just gazing out at me. And it's so weird and interesting seeing only the glowing eyes of your animals at night. So that was a very cool, interesting story of something that happened to me. And it almost reminded me of another story that I got to try to remember to write down. But speaking of lights, I gotta get some Christmas lights, some Christmas decorations up on my house. It's we're halfway through December already, and I don't have any up. And normally, especially when I was living with my mom, we'd have had Christmas decorations up by Thanksgiving. And it's one of those things where it's not that I don't want to decorate my house or that I don't have the Christmas spirit, although it's definitely an adjustment trying to get into the spirit with no snow, having grown up where we get snow most of the time. Even if it's not on Christmas Day, it's during the season. But it's honestly just become one of those things where I have a hard time managing all my time for that stuff. And it takes time to decorate a house with any sort of decorations. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I could do like a half-ass, like put a couple Santa things up on the house, or like something like that, put like one strand of lights on my porch. But let's be honest, when you see a house that does that, you kind of think, you might have been better off just not putting lights up than that half-assed attempt. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the guy that puts up one strand of lights and is like, there, did it. Merry Christmas. Nah, man, I want to make it worthwhile, which takes time. And if you remember from that episode I did where I took the personality test, I kind of talked about how I have this trait that I need to work out of myself, where if I don't think I can do something perfectly in completion in like one sitting, I don't even bother attempting it. So I put things off, and that's not a good trait to have. Being a perfectionist is probably, listen to me carefully here, I don't want it to be misconstrued. Being a perfectionist, I think, is the worst thing someone can be. It's the biggest character flaw. Now, don't misunderstand me. Having high standards is not a bad trait, right? Having high standards is something that we all should try to have with our work. Being a perfectionist, however, is different. At least the way I like to think of it and understand it. Because the way I look at being a perfectionist is you are someone with high standards, but your standards are too high to where they can never be met. So you never end up accomplishing anything, or you never stop obsessing over something because you'll never be able to get it to a level where you're satisfied. Or if you're lucky and you do, it's going to take forever. Because let's be honest, this is not a perfect world. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. It's okay to have high standards for something, but sometimes you need to know when to let go. And sometimes you need to know when to get over the fact that something's not going to be perfect and just go out and do it. And that, I think, is where I sort of fall, is I'm worried about doing something imperfect, and that stops me from even attempting it. So imagine how fucked up that is. You're so obsessed with trying to do something perfectly that your fear and anxiety over not being able to get it perfect stops you from doing it at all, so you get nothing done. And then it can't be perfect for sure because you haven't done it. Anyway, another tangent. The point is, I want to just fuck around and do some half-ass Christmas decorations. I want to make it look good. So, I haven't even done anything yet, which I'm going to. Like I said, I need to shake that habit. I need to work on how I can shake that habit. And I've kind of lost where my point was with that. I guess I was just going to say that I'm going to have to get some extension cords and measure some things out, because I've got some trees out front in my yard that I kind of want to maybe try spiraling some lights up, because there's a house nearby that did that, and it looks really cool. And then I'll put some lights up along my porch, and I have some Christmas trees out and stuff on my front porch, like some artificial ones that'll light up and stuff like that. It's going to look really cool. And it would probably raise my electricity bill, except I've stopped using my HVAC, my heating, and my air conditioning in my house because, well, I'm used to it getting really cold in the winter, which would cause us to need to use heat. But here, their really cold is is less cold than what I'm used to, so I haven't needed the heat. It actually hasn't quite gotten cold enough yet to where I'll need to start running the heat. It will get cold enough probably that we'll need to do that, but it hasn't yet. And, of course, during the summer I was running AC 24/7. So I figure it balances out. You pay more for Christmas lights, but you pay less for heating and cooling, which I think is going to come out to a lot more savings in the end. And then my house will be all nice and pretty for the holidays. So that was something else I wanted to talk about. Interesting point to note here. Sometimes I might sound like I'm getting a little flustered during these episodes trying to find something to talk about quickly. It's because, and I get that it doesn't have to be this way, I try to record these episodes in one take. I try not to have to do too much editing on them because it's extra work, and I could, potentially pay someone to help me with it or find the time to do it myself, but the podcast isn't yet at a level where I can justify, paying someone every week to cut up these videos for me. And so I want to try and get these in one take, and therefore I don't want to give you guys a bunch of dead air, because nobody wants to just listen to dead air while I try to skip on to the next topic. And I have not yet unlocked the perk in the skill tree to where I can sort of ramble about some random stuff until I get the next topic in my notes. Actually, this is a good one, since I mentioned snow and the Christmas spirit and the weather and the heating and stuff. I've mentioned that I came from Vermont, where, of course, in the winter, it gets really cold and we get a lot of snow. And we get snowstorms and stuff in the winter. Alabama does not get very many snowstorms. When they do get snow at all, it's like Armageddon. However, it becomes like, and this is just anecdotally speaking because I've never been myself, but it becomes kind of like the UK, like England. It just rains all the time, like probably 5 days a week. You know, it rains like it's got a full-time job. Instead of snow, we just mostly get rain. And the thing about Alabama is it really doesn't ever rain just a little bit. When it rains, you know it's raining. And there's the levels of rain down here are basically like, oh, it's a pretty rainy day today, and wow, somebody has done something horribly wrong and made God angry, and he's flooding the earth again. I mean, these are the levels we're talking about. And in fact, sometimes down here we get tornado season, which is another adjustment because Vermont never has tornadoes. I don't think it's ever had a tornado, or maybe there's maybe one tornado that it's ever had, I think, that I can think of. If it wasn't a tornado, it was just a very destructive storm. But we get tornadoes down here. And I remember the first storm and tornado watch we had this season. This is the first one I had since moving down here into my house. And I was actually over at my parents' house the night it was happening. But we had some pretty good winds. It actually had ended up knocking a very large branch off one of the trees in my yard. Like this big, massive tree. Like a branch big enough that it would have killed you if it fell on you. It dug a huge hole in my lawn where it landed and stuff. But luckily, no tornadoes rolled through the town where me or my parents live. But these winds were so strong that, if you recall, for my internet, I have this dish, this Starlink dish, that I mounted up in the top of a tree in my yard. I'm so sorry if I'm retelling this story. I don't think I told it. I don't think I told this one on the podcast yet. But if I did, I apologize, and you feel free to yell at me in the comments. It had ended up knocking out my power in my house, and also had pushed over the mount that my internet dish was on, so it was horizontal up in the tree. And my internet doesn't work when it's like that. It needs to be near vertical for it to work properly, for the motors to be able to move properly and everything like that. So it just worked out conveniently that while my power was out, I took the opportunity to climb up that tree again and go fix the dish. Made sure that the bracket was screwed super tight so it wouldn't tilt over like that again. And then also tied a rope, zip, heavy duty, cable ties, zip ties, and a very heavy duty rubber bungee cord to keep that thing upright, fastened around the mount and the tree so that it's upright. So that hopefully next time that rolls through, it's not going to tilt over again. I don't have to keep going to risk my life to climb up that tree. Because, I don't know, the last 2 times I think I climbed up, which is crazy to think that I've done it that many times, it wasn't... the first time was absolutely daunting. The next 2 times weren't so bad. This time, for whatever reason, as I got near the top, I was so nervous. I could feel the swaying of the top of the tree so much more. And I don't know why. I feel like I definitely felt it before, but it didn't freak me out. I don't know, maybe it didn't sway as badly because maybe when the tree was full of leaves, they sort of helped give it some stability or whatever. I have no idea, but for whatever reason, this last time kind of freaked me out a little bit. And so I was really hoping to not have to do that again. So let's hope I don't. But I got that fixed, and shortly thereafter, once I got to the ground, my power came back on. And yeah, I mean that's just getting used to the weather down here in Alabama, I guess. So let's see, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, I came up. I thought of this funny joke, just randomly when I was washing my hands in a public bathroom. I think it was a public bathroom sometime. Might have been at the gym or whatever. I was going and using the bathroom, and I was washing my hands, and I thought about something, because it's happened to me. It's happened to everyone probably. I was thinking, man, with the phones we have, the phone. I don't know if it happens more now. It almost seems like it because it didn't really ever happen to me before smartphones, but it seems like it's so much more common now. Besides all the scam calls you get to get butt dialed or to butt dial somebody with your phone, and I just came up with this joke that, man, these days with phones, seems like people get butt dialed more than someone in prison who drops the soap. And if you get that joke, bravo. If you don't get that joke, well done for your innocence, and or I'll give you a hint. Look up different brands of soap, and maybe you'll see something that sort of rings a bell, and you'll put two and two together. But I don't know. It's a dumb joke because I don't know if butt dialing is more common these days. But you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to say it is. Because why not? For the premise of the joke, And I was just so proud of myself for coming up with that pun, stupid as it is, because it's probably still one of the most clever ones I've come up with, at least that I've remembered to write down. And I wanted an excuse to tell it. So there you go. A Jabbering Jake Podcast exclusive. Should have saved that one for the Patreon. But we're coming into the holiday season, and hopefully I will get a chance to go visit home again, visit some friends and family back up north, and collect some snow and bring it back down here. And as we sort of go into this holiday season where, it's sort of this balancing act between being thankful for our loved ones and finding the time to go out and spend some time with loved ones, sort of also in balance with the commercialization and the buying of gifts and taking advantage of all these deals and gift giving, exchanging gifts with loved ones and friends and family, and the religious reasons for this holiday. If you're religious, I just want to say on that theme that it's crazy to think that I've been able to go along with this podcast for as long as I have, because there are you guys and gals, and whatever else you identify as. There's people out there watching, and that's what motivates me to keep sitting here talking to all of you, even if it's not as consistent and perfect every week as it should be. It's something I'm working on more and more to get more consistent episodes out. And I know I keep saying that till I'm blue in the face, but it really does mean a lot that there are people out there listening to this, because if you weren't, I probably would have stopped by now. Who knows? So thank you all for listening. It really does mean a lot. And if you're enjoying the podcast, as always, tell your friends, family, enemies, acquaintances. Tell people about this podcast and share it out there and spread the word. Tell them where they can find it. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, a lot of the common podcast platforms. And if you do feel so compelled and you want to support the podcast, be sure to check out the sponsor, Anchor. They're how this podcast is possible as well. They're who allowed, they made it possible for me to be able to upload this and distribute it to all the platforms. Or, feel free to donate to the Patreon. You can make certain monthly donations, which give you access to rewards like early access to episodes and the possibility to contribute to questions or topics to be discussed on the podcast. So, if you want to support the podcast, check out either of those things. And again, most importantly, tell other people about the podcast. Tell them to check it out too. But thank you guys again for watching. And until next time, see ya.